It's Aster The Hybrid Floof, owner of Retro Driftpack Productions, back again with more Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. Today we're stepping into one of the most iconic challenges in the game, the Amateur League Gran Turismo All-Stars. Now, if you played Gran Turismo 3, you already know this series isn't your average Sunday drive. The All-Stars Championship throws you against some of the fastest, most legendary racing machines in Gran Turismo history. These cars are built to dominate, and AI doesn't play nice here. Every lap counts, every mistake costs, and every overtake feels like a small victory. We've got a five race lineup for part one, which is Laguna Seca Raceway, home of the brutal Corkscrew, Forest Raceway Reverse, a technical favorite flipped on its head, Midfield Raceway, a Gran Turismo classic, smooth but punishing, Test Course, Slipstream Chess at 240 miles per hour, and Apricot Hill Raceway Reverse, an underrated gem with some tricky corners in its reverse layout. I'll be breaking down each race as it happens, the good, the bad, and the how did I survive that moments. And since this is part 1, we are only halfway through the gauntlet. Part 2 is coming soon, where the real monsters of this championship start to bare their teeth. So grab a snack, settle in, and let's kick off this the right way. First stop, Laguna Seca, let's go. Alright, so first up we got Laguna Seca Raceway, which is famously known for its corkscrew, and if you ever play Gran Turismo, you know this track loves to ruin a good lap with the insane downhill twist. Alright, so we are lined up against some pretty heavy hitter cars. We got the Corvette C5R, the Castrol Mugen NSX, Lancer Evolution DI Rally Car, the Pennzoil Nismo GTR, the Subaru Impreza Rally Car prototype, and my personal car, which is the F688S, or just a Formula car in simpler terms. Okay, so we did have a pretty clean launch off the rip, to be honest with you, and it's looking pretty good so far with the race. I mean, we've pretty much already overtaken every single car in this race, and you may be like, why use this car? Because, yes, and I'll elaborate in the middle of the race why I wanted to use this car in specific. Alright, so we are halfway through the race officially, and I will elaborate why I used this specific Formula car for this race. It all boils down to one simple fact: it's just an overpowered vehicle. And you may be like, oh, isn't that considered cheating? No, it's not considered cheating because I won it from a championship, an endurance race to be more specific. And roulette, you have a 25% chance to get each car, and somehow I landed on the Formula car, and I have 2 other Formula cars in my garage, but y'all won't see those until later on in this Gran Turismo 3 series. So yeah, I'm mainly using it because I just want to use it. Also, another reason why I decided to use this car is because it fits the series perfectly. I mean, pretty much every single car in that game, aside from the Corvette C5R, I said game didn't I meant every single car in this championship, aside from the Corvette C5R, is Japanese based, and I know technically that within the game files that the Formula cars aren't based off a Japanese car, more based on like 80s and 90s European, what's it called? 80s and 90s European Formula One vehicles. But the Gran Turismo didn't have the rights to license them during the time, therefore they had to come up with a generic name for all four models for the North American version of the game. So that's another reason why I decided to use this car in the race. Alright, so we are on the final lap of this race, and we are officially coming up on the corkscrew. We're hitting the straightaway, then we make a left turn, and then up we go, and then there's the corkscrew right there. Just do this real quick, and yeah. Alright, so the first race is officially over, and we are officially on the podium in the top position with 10 points, as you can see on your screen. So let's move on to the next race. I think y'all are really going to like this next race. Alright, so the next race is Deep Forest Raceway. A lot of y'all are familiar with this track, especially since they added it back in Gran Turismo 7. And it is a favorite track, but it's not my top favorite track, because it feels like an old school rally track paved for speed. That's the best way I can really describe this track. One of the earliest things you might have noticed with the Forest Raceway Reverse track compared to the regular Forest Raceway track is how the sun is positioned. I can't really define if it's a sunrise or a sunset. I want to say it's a sunrise, but if it's a sunset, then I'm wrong. It's okay, but that's one of the main things that really stick out during this track. Another thing to note during this track compared to the normal version of Deep Forest Raceway is the main fact that how the sun is positioned will affect your driving as well. Like, you have to be more aware than the original Deep Forest Raceway track, because a lot of the parts are unlit or like dimly lit because of all the trees in the area blocking the sunlight from actually hitting the road or for you to see in front of you. So not only are you worrying about just doing the track as like a regular, any ordinary track per se, but you also have to worry about like your dexterity and stuff like that, and getting the real feel of the track. Alright, so we are halfway through the second race, and as you can see, there's really no competition because look how far back these cars are behind me. I would give a good estimate, maybe being like 20 seconds or something like that behind me. But it's only going to get more. I'm trying to find a word to put it. I'm not going to say the word unhinged, but it's going to get a little bit more crazy as the race progresses because remember, this is a Formula car. This isn't like your JGGC or your average rally car like all the other opponents are in this race, but an official Formula One vehicle that can rev up to at least 12,000 RPM. So this gives me a huge advantage, is what I'm saying in a nutshell. Alright, we are officially done with D-Force Raceway 2, or D-Force Raceway Reverse, and as you can tell by the podium, we are still on the top podium with another 10 points being added to our official point score. So we're just going to be moving on to the next track, and this track is a lot easier for a car like this because, you know, so let's just get right into the next track. Alright, so the next track is a Gran Turismo classic. It's been a staple of the game since the original inception of Gran Turismo, I believe, which is none other than Midfield Raceway. And if you have played Gran Turismo 3, you probably spent hours on this track, whether it be through one make races or the Formula GT Championship. You've definitely been on this track before. And you really can't say you're a GT fan unless you've been on this track because of how iconic it is, so. So this is just a little bit of random filler for this video. So, Midfield Raceway was another one of the tracks that was originally supposed to be in Gran Turismo 5. After the Gran Turismo 4 was released and they released the Gran Turismo 5 prologue, Midfield Raceway was supposed to be in the final edition of Gran Turismo 5, but for some reason, it never made the cut. And if you look into the game files, the track is there, and I've seen people actually play on it. So I guess it may have been for like people who downloaded a specific thing or something like that. So yeah, that's just a little bit of knowledge for y'all. Also, it hasn't really been seen since after Gran Turismo 4, so even in Gran Turismo 7, it's still virtually non-existent, so hopefully they add it back in the future. So yeah, that concludes the third race of this track, and again we have won first place, really no competition, and we have 30 points in total because another 10 points has been added to our official score. So moving on to the next track, which is one that I dislike the most. I'm going to go off script here and just speak what's on my mind about this track, so stay tuned for that. So the next race, we got the most boring, unappealing track that Gran Turismo had to offer during this game. Like the entire game, this is probably the most boring track that you could race on. And this track is known as Test Course. Now, the reason you may be wondering why I say it's boring is because there's no scenery, there's nothing really there. It feels like an airport runway. It feels like a predated version of Special Stage Route X that was first added to Gran Turismo. It was either Gran Turismo 5 or 6 that Special Stage Route X was added to the game, but it feels like a short version of that. And all this track is, I feel like, is a placeholder track. I feel like a lot more could have been done to this track to begin with, like added more scenery or something like that. Instead, it just looks so bland. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good for like speed and stuff like that to test your top speed of your car, but other than that, there's really no use for this track. I don't even know why they use this track in the game to begin with. It should just stayed as like a track that should have been in the background. Probably another reason why I have such a disdain for this track is because everyone knows the Vitz race where you get a Toyota Vitz. Me specifically, I have the pink Vitz. Now, in the professional league, Test Course is a track that's in the 5-race series, and I dislike the fact that it's even there because it takes about 30 minutes to finish that race using probably one of the slowest cars that you can possibly buy in the game, aside from like the Suzuki Alto Works or like the Mini Cooper 1.3. This is by far like mental warfare if you really think about it, because the developers were like, hey, how can we make this more boring to our players to begin with, than adding this race to an already slow car that would take like a long time to finish the race. So that's another reason why I have a disdain for this track. Alright, so that concludes the fourth race for the first part of this championship, and we're still on the podium. We got 40 points in total, so that's another added 10 points, and we are to the final race of part 1 to this series, so let's just get right into that video. Alright, so we are officially at our last and final race for this series, which is Apricot Hill Raceway Reverse. Now, this is probably another one of a good track that I really like, but that's aside from the point. I mean, this is the final race for part 1 of the series, and as I said before in the beginning of the video, part 2 will be out. Also, if you made it this far to the video, you might as well subscribe to the channel and become a drifter yourself, so yeah. Now, in my personal opinion, Apricot Hill Raceway was definitely one of the more overlooked tracks in the Gran Turismo series. I mean, it's iconic, but it's probably not as iconic as some of the other tracks. The other tracks being Special Stage Route 5, Special Stage Route 11. There's a couple of other tracks in this game that I just can't name off the top of my head, but it had about as much of an impact as you would expect. I mean, I think Apricot Hill Raceway was another one of the tracks that was in the original Gran Turismo series. Up until Gran Turismo 6, that was the last time we saw of it, and we haven't seen it in either Gran Turismo Sport or Gran Turismo 7, so here's hoping that they add this track back too, because, in my opinion, it being an underrated track and putting it into Gran Turismo 7 would give it a lot more exposure to the newer generation of gamers, in my opinion. And they could really experience and understand what it was like to actually drive on this track. I mean, it does have its twists and turns and stuff like that, but that's besides the point. I just like the track in general. Alright, so we are halfway through this race, and everything is looking pretty good so far. I mean, we are ahead of the competition, but that's really no surprise since we are using a Formula 1 car, while the other AI bots in this race are using JGTC cars and rally cars, but, you know, it's really hard to beat a car that revs to 12,000 RPM, in my opinion. I mean, it's really hard to do that. Unless if you have a better Formula car, which there is a better one than this one, but y'all will not see that until the very last series that I do on this channel, which will be the Formula GT Championship. And that's not going to be for a while, so you might as well just keep waiting, and then eventually that video will be up, but it will probably be broken down into 10 parts, and yeah. Wow, so we completely dominated the entire competition throughout this entire first part of this series. And we've already got 50 points so far out of 100 points that you could possibly get. So there's really not that much to talk about here, except I will see y'all guys in the next part. I've been your host, Aster the Hybrid Floof, and as I always say, y'all keep safe out there and keep on drifting. And yeah, this has been a PSA from Aster the Hybrid Floof, owner of Retro Driftpack Productions, and I will see you on the next one. Y'all take care. Peace.